And when they called, I swear I thought it was a deep fake. It's lovely to be here, and it's always my co-author Bobby Chesney and I, we've been writing about deep fakes. We always do our Laura Lee attempt at explaining the technology. So there is literally nothing better than following Hani, whose work we lovingly cite. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why it is that we human beings are really responsible for making deepfakes dangerous, right? Why they go viral, what it is about us. I'm going to talk a bit about the harm and what law, tech companies, and society can do. So we have, as human beings, a visceral reaction to audio and video. It grabs us. We believe it's true because we think we can believe what our eyes and ears are telling us. And we're drawn to the salacious, the negative, and the novel. After the 2016 election, online researchers found that fake news spreads 10 times faster than accurate stories. And the researchers found that it wasn't bots, it was human beings that were spreading the fake news. And lastly, we tend to share and to like information that aligns with our viewpoints. Psychologists call this tendency confirmation bias. And so social media platforms supercharge that tendency by allowing us to share information that confirms our viewpoints that's negative and novel, and especially if it's audio and video, with hundreds and potentially thousands of people, right? So let me talk a little, I'm going to depress you a little. I feel like my work is always incredibly depressing. So some of the harm I'm going to talk to you about. So individuals, when they're targeted deep fakes, it can be life-ruining. So Rana Ayub is a journalist in India whose work has exposed government corruption and human rights violations. And she's, over the course of the years, gotten used to, some, rape threats in her inbox, and she is used to the rough and tumble of online life. But as she explained to me when I interviewed her for my next book, Sexual Privacy, nothing could have prepared her for what happened in April 2018. She was sitting in a cafe with a friend when she first saw it, so when her inbox starts blowing up, it's a video of her engaged in a sex act, and she's a really beautiful woman. She has like really curly hair and big brown eyes, and it looks just like Rana. She was devastated. She had never made a sex video. And within 48 hours, the video went viral. So it was shared more than 40,000 times. So right away, a cyber mob sort of descends. So all of her online accounts, her email, text, Facebook, Twitter, are filled with death and rape threats. People start impersonating her online and saying that she's available for sex. And they dox her, meaning they post her home address and her contact, her cell phone number. And she's terrified. She's afraid to go outside. And for a while she thought she was crazy. But then the UN Council on Human Rights issued a public statement saying they were worried about her safety. She stopped writing. She withdrew all of her online accounts, which, as a journalist, is a really tough thing to do and maintain your career. And, it really hijacked how she thought about her physical safety and her life as a whole, like proceeding outward. So it's not, of course, just individuals. And increasingly, though, as we see the targeting of people with deep fakes, it's more often, which is true of cyberstalking, women, non-whites, and LGBTQ folks. So it's usually people from marginalized communities. Now, corporations, so Hani had fraud up, right? So I'm just going to give you an example from 2.5 weeks ago. A CEO who was in Germany thought he received a phone call from he was a subsidiary company, from his parent company CEO in France. And he got instructions to wire money to an account. And it was the conversation, he believed it sounded exactly like his boss. It was consistent with everything they had previously talked about. So it made tons of sense that he was being asked to do this. But as it turns out, wires the $250,000. It was a deepfake audio, right? And so, Hannah, you had national security on the list. So imagine a deepfake video showing American soldiers in Afghanistan burning a Quran. And imagine if the very next day there's a deepfake showing a London-based imam calling for the murder of those soldiers. We could see violence not only against the soldiers and American soldiers in Afghanistan, but violence across the globe. So what about, just generally speaking, truth? In a world in which, increasingly as technologists are anticipating that soon it's going to be almost impossible to tell the difference between fakery and what's real. And I'm relying on you, Hani, to solve this problem, right? We're going to have, hopefully we will have a point, right, where technologists can engage in the kind of sophisticated practices that Hani is working so hard at Berkeley. But there will be a liminal period where we won't be able to. And we're so distrustful of institutions, democratic institutions, and leaders, and folks in positions of power. And so deepfakes find an audience really primed to believe them. And it's not just that we're going to believe fakery. It's also that we're going to disbelieve the truth. And so, we've already seen politicians say of real audio and video of their misdeeds, you can't believe it, right? It's just a fake. President Trump tried it with the Access Hollywood video. First admitting it was him, and then oh no, maybe that wasn't me. Same of the Lester Holt interview. So that's what Professor Bobby Chesney and I, who we've been writing a series of articles together about deepfakes, we call that the liar's dividend. The notion that liars will seize on the phenomenon of deepfakes to cast doubt and evade responsibility and accountability for their own wrongdoing. So now, the next question is, what do we do about it? And unfortunately, people always say, all right, you're a lawyer, you can fix this, as a lawyer and law professor. And law, of course, there isn't a silver bullet, right? And law cannot, it's a blunt instrument. It can't do it all. And especially in this sort of space, it's true that if we could find perpetrators, and if we had jurisdiction over them, and if we had money and funds, and if they lived in the US, we might be able to sue them for defamation, fraud, but so often we can't. And law just is not up to the challenge of deepfakes. We don't have a federal criminal law in the books. States are engaged in sort of very tentative efforts. They're really imprecise. And so Hani, myself, and my colleague Marianne Franks at the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative are working with folks on the House and the Senate side to devise federal criminal legislation that would ban harmful deepfakes, harmful digital forgeries or impersonations, and excluding things like parody and satire. Now, of course, what about the tech companies? We are in a moment in which we're talking about the responsibility of platforms. And my advice to platforms has been to ban deepfakes, but only deepfakes that are harmful, right? Excluding valuable uses of the technology. And that, of course, is going to be expensive. You can't throw an algorithm and figure out yet if something is a deepfake. And so we need people to look at the content and context of a deepfake to figure out if it is indeed a harmful impersonation, or if it's satire, if it's art, it's a use for some sort of historical value. And we can maybe talk about this later in the Q&A, but there's a law that provides an immunity from liability for online service providers, for publishing other people's content. And that law needs to be fixed, and I've done a significant amount of work on how we might fix it. And we also have to educate ourselves, right? We need to do better. We click, we link, we share, and we just don't even think about it. So we need sort of a healthy dose of societal resilience. And it's not just our kids. I have to say our young people are fairly savvy, increasingly as they're being educated in schools. They're taking your class, Ira, right? They're listening. I know they're listening, right? But what's interesting is that research shows that it's often people who are over, so I'm 50, so I'm going to include myself in this group, but people over 50, they're more likely to share fake news. So we need some educating because it's really in our hands that we turn deep fakes into weapons. So I think I'll stop there and thank you and look forward to our questions.